Moody's obviously sees these as directly connected, the downgrade today with the debate that's taking place on Capitol Hill, the tax and spend bill that's supposed to lend itself to a reconciliation project here. There are great concerns about adding to the debt and deficit. Do you share those worries?
I do 100%. I come from Tennessee. We have zero debt. We're A triple plus. All the rating agencies give us that because we don't borrow money. We pay down everything, and we don't have a state income tax. And the federal government just prints more money. There's a lack of maturity in both parties, frankly, and people are just looking to get through the next election.
Well, so if you do agree, Congressman, do your colleagues Chip Roy, Ralph Norman, those who shot this big package down in the Budget Committee today, have a point that this bill, as written, as it stands right now, the various parts of it, should not pass?
Well, that's what Moody's has said, and everyone agrees with it. The problem is folks back home aren't grasping the seriousness of $36 trillion in debt and runaway inflation. In 7 years, the largest single item we'll pay will just be interest on our loan. And the Chinese are going to stop playing ball with us, and we're going to collapse if we're not careful. I tweeted today, I said, I'm worried about losing our majority, but I'm worried more about losing our dadgum country, because what we know today, the economic freedoms we enjoy, will not be enjoyed much longer if we continue down this path.
Well, of course, President Trump would say that then if we don't pass this bill, it'll result in the biggest tax hike in recent history, 65% higher for some folks. What's worse for the fiscal health of our country, a tax hike or more deficit spending?
I think we can actually get by positive on both. We can reduce spending and keep reducing taxes. All we're doing is continuing the tax credits that President Trump had put in his first term, and it's not going to increase on anyone. And so if we would just do some fiscal responsible programs and stop playing around and stop worrying about elections, I think we could all get there. But we're not. Everyone will be more people in Washington, rather. They're worried about being in leadership or worried about being in the majority. They're not worried about putting America first. And Trump actually is. I believe he's going to get engaged. I believe that there is going to be some things resolved. I believe Chip Roy and my dear friend Congressman Norman understand that as much as anybody does. And they're worried more about our country's fiscal responsibility, as I am, than our own political futures. And I believe President Trump believes that as well. And I think that's why they'll come together. I tell folks, look, this is like an NBA basketball game. Don't watch the whole game. Just watch the last 2 minutes and we'll get it worked out.
Well, so does this mean, as we consider President Trump, who you think shares some of these beliefs, that he is asking for too much that would add to this burden, Congressman? Should he not be getting everything he wants when it comes to no tax on tips or overtime, for example?
I mean, do you honestly think people are paying the full tax on tips now, ma'am? No, I believe that President Trump wants fiscal responsibility. He's a businessman. He understands just because he has money doesn't mean he should spend it. And if he doesn't have it, he knows dadgum good and well he can't spend it. And I believe our side of the aisle, the conservatives, is myself, because I haven't checked off on this plan yet either myself, and they know it. But they're the ones that'll be voting on it in the committee. So, yeah, I think there's room for both. I think we can reduce taxes. Why don't we just reduce the size of government? If we could just go back to under pre-COVID spending levels, ma'am, we could work this out. You can't name me one program that's been, and I'm not pointing you out, but I'm saying America can't name one dadgum program that's been added since COVID that you can't live without. But yet, if we went back under that, we could balance and work this thing out. But we don't have the maturity to do that. We are addicted to our grandchildren's money, and that has got to change, both parties.
Huh. Well, with that said, what's your message to Republicans, many of them from the Northeast, who are looking for a higher SALT cap, Congressman? Can you afford it?
No, I don't think it's fiscally responsible. I think we can probably afford something. It's state and local taxes. All they're asking, New York, New Jersey, California, these Democrat-controlled states, all they're asking the Republican-controlled states that are acting responsible is to supplant their lack of tax dollars. They're going to put another radical program in that costs them money. They're going to tax businesses, drive businesses off, and they're going to ask the responsible Republican-controlled states to bail them out. And that's all the SALT tax does. They should be forced to fix their own dadgum problem within their states and keep their hands off of Tennessee's money. But I suspect there'll be a compromise. We used to say in the Tennessee legislature, everybody's going to be a little unhappy, but at the end, it's going to be okay. And look, we get 95% of what you want. I'd call that a victory. And I think we're on that right path. I think President Trump is engaged with this. And as he usually does, he waits to the end. He sees what everybody wants, and then he tries to figure something out. That is the art of the deal, and that's why he's successful.
It does raise the question, though, Congressman, finally, of timing, knowing that the Treasury has warned Congress needs to pass a debt ceiling increase by mid-July, or we risk running up against the X date, which could create a whole host of potential problems with the rating agencies beyond what they're already warning about. Does that potentially, at this ratings downgrade, though, add fuel to those who don't want to see the debt limit increase by much in the name of fiscal responsibility? What does that do to this entire argument?
It makes it an argument that we need to be more fiscally responsible, which I doubt we, in the long run, we won't. See, a lot of these plans, these tax plans that we had in place were 5, 6 years, some were even almost 10 years down the road before they would be implemented, and that's how they were balancing the budget. And you know good and well that Donald Trump is not going to be the president in 5 or 10 years. And possibly, unfortunately, we might have a Democrat in there, and they're going to do away with everything that we've tried to put in. That's why it's important to make these things permanent and quit with all the double talk. Ma'am, we just cannot spend more money than we take in. That's the bottom line. If we could just get back to some fiscal responsibility, we could do that. And the bonding agencies and all the rating agencies would love that. America would sure love it because their dollars would go farther and they could be able to save up for that American dream.
Congressman, bring us behind the scenes for a moment. What are you hearing from your colleagues about this budget committee hearing that's set for Sunday night? Will this actually pass? Can we get to rules next week?
I think if we get some agreement, like I said, hold your nose on the salt thing and get the Medicaid stuff worked out, the waste, abuse, and fraud, and quit listening to I'm glad you all haven't joined in this, but when you're cutting waste, abuse, and fraud and things like Medicaid, that just provides more money for the least amongst us. They ought to be for that, but in fact, they're not, because it pays for all their bogus programs on the left, and they know it, and it pays all those people to come to the polls that aren't going to work. And America's sick of it. Look, if you've got kids or if you're disabled, you can't work, the program's for you. But if you're not, if you're able-bodied and sitting on the couch and watching watching The View all day, that gum, you ought to be out getting a job, and you at least ought to qualify for some job training. That's all we're trying to do with this. We're taking the illegals off of this stuff. We can do that, and then agree to hold our nose on something on salt. I think we can get to that table.